research as I'm really perplexed on what the most basic fundamental category would be for basing wellness off of. And at the bottom of our pyramid, up to today, we've been putting breath at the very bottom with the mindset that it's the one thing that we're doing the most of. And the idea with the wellness pyramid would be if you capitalize on getting some structure and some health put into the things we do the most, you would create a force multiplication of each of those contributing to the greater whole. If you get what you're doing the most closest to a healthy solution, then the things that you're doing the least, you'll just recognize that, for example, going to church once a week or going to yoga once a week, although those things are very good for you, 1 hour out of the 168 during the week is not going to change your life. It just won't. So that was the impetus behind the wellness model being based on a pyramidal sort of a concept. But this morning before I got here, I did a little research on how many breaths does the average human being take a day? And the range was between 17,900 and 23,500 based on age, based on your breathing disciplines and whatnot. So let's just say 20,000
over a 24-hour period.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So 20 breaths per day for the average person. And again, the bookends were 17 something and 23 something. So 20 is right there in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, I remember a podcast we did several months ago where we were talking about thoughts and research that's been done on how many thoughts does the average human being have today. And the bookends there are 20,000 on the low end and 80,000 on the high end.
Wow.
So it isn't that a thought and a breath are the same amount of time. So we're still talking about time as being the concept we're trying to lay down as like, what are you doing with your time in terms of health and wellness? But it is interesting to me that it looks like perhaps thought may be what goes on the very bottom of our pyramid. So we'll keep pushing into this as to which one is on the bottom. But they're both big numbers, and they really both deserve our full attention, because that is where we're going to capitalize and have the potential for the most gains.
Yeah.
So any thoughts about just a little bit of the research to back up what we're talking about?
Yeah, I do actually. I was contemplating myself as I was putting together the program yesterday and thinking about how to continue, how to grow this. You and I have talked about creating some worksheets and some interactive material that people can use to sort of assess where they're at. But the thing that really struck me, because I had the same debate, thinking about mind and thinking about breath, and where I landed with it was, while the idea of the mind being at the base made some sense, in the end it didn't, because if I'm not breathing, I'm not worried about it. If I'm not breathing, I don't have a mind. If I'm not breathing, I'm dead. If I'm dead, is it of no value in this physical form? So it could be there's a balance point there somewhere, but to me it was maybe in the scheme of I'm not even sure actually. So that's where so we sort of landed in different places, thinking the same process. I'm not considering the number of thoughts, because the number of thoughts are not self-generated, meaning we don't sit and any more than we breathe actually. So it actually helps the same. Although we can consciously breathe and we can consciously manage thought. So interesting way to begin this. But we're evolving it, so that's the fun part. We're getting to evolve this model and in real time, because much of the stuff that happens, if y'all are not aware out there in live land here, is part of the process of these deep dives is that it is the energy that Jeff and I can generate together and stimulating each other, but also individually getting into that alignment place, so that we're actively seeking and actively striving to kind of translate and download universal mind, universal energy. Being able to pull these concepts apart is a combination of trained history, but also experience and also connection, being able to connect the dots of our experience. So this really, to me, is a sort of incredible foundational tool to really provide a different approach to wellness that is not driven by necessarily what you eat and what you do. It's driven by where you put your focus and how you focus your energy, which then translates to what happens in your physical reality. So there's whether you're in breath or whether you're in mind, yeah, it's an interesting debate there. Not sure that I'd be curious what would be the anchor for you that would make it mind rather than breath? Because I can't get over the dead part. If I'm not breathing, I'm not here. So, so my mind is a relative uselessness if I'm not here. So I'm trying to work my way around that.
Yeah. Well, most people don't die because they don't breathe. So, death usually isn't something that happens just because you don't breathe. It's usually not the cause of death, is somebody just stops breathing.
No, I don't mean cause of breath. I just mean that if breath isn't the foundation, if you're not breathing, then there's not a body present.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean. I maybe I misspoke that, but go ahead. So I agree. Most people don't die from not breathing. We're on the same page there.
Yeah. If your heart's not beating and you don't have blood flowing either, you're not going to be alive. So I don't know, the bodily piece, it seems to be somewhat autonomic. I think what we're really talking about is becoming conscious, becoming more enlightened, more aware, more conscious of both our breath and our thinking, instead of letting them just run on an automatic default mode that part of our brain will do if we're not willing to step in there and do it. So what we're really talking about is applying energy or consciousness to our thinking and to our breathing, instead of letting them just run on autopilot, which they're completely capable of doing. But you'll wind up going back to an illness model rather than a wellness model if you go on autopilot.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that's one of the so just as a quick review, which we kind of been hashing through some of this, but the idea here is shifting from that illness-based model to a wellness-based model. And that shift, as Jeff was just alluding to, is pretty enormous, because they come from two entirely different perspectives, I think. At least where we're coming from. When we're focused on it's one of the challenges with allopathic medicine at its core, is that it doesn't really tend to energy at all. It's looking at cause and effect in physical reality. And what we're striving to, and not just this model, but in many wellness models, is a complete shift from that understanding the physical reality is the result of the energetic reality, not the other way around. And so the more we can shift our wellness to managing our own field and managing our own energy and creating expansion within that field and building that, there are a number of things that are remarkable. One, that puts all of the creative power in our space. That puts all of the power in our space, as opposed to someone outside of ourselves dictating or telling us what that means or what that looks like. It also means that there's a balance, because like with any transformation, it's about transcend and include. So I'm not saying throw away allopathic medicine. That doesn't make sense. There are times and places and spaces where that's absolutely important. When the physical process goes so far down the pike, sometimes it's not, you may not have time or the focus or the ability and energy to shift that momentum that you created. So the allopathic medicine can, in times, create a stopgap or create some change so that you can then find a new balance or a new center, as opposed to throw it all away, it's all bad, keep this as it's all good. But our focus here is about the energy. We want to support people in shifting into a wellness model that's based on those things we do most. And the reason that is that it's the amount of time and energy. And so as we look at this model here, just for a second, I've got to update a little bit. So we're still in the breath and mind piece, but the dance there is inextricable. You know, really, if you think about it, it's who comes first, the chicken or the egg, maybe. But their dance is definitely connected and deeply aligned together. So this model is a progressive model, meaning that every level that you focus in influences the next level, and that's true positively or negatively. And that's the part that I love about this as it unfolds, is that it works every direction you move from, meaning that if you focus well in breath and you use your breath, you can influence the mind, which can influence your sleep, which can influence your work, etc. And the same goes negatively. If you're not paying attention, then your mind can be wilder, your sleep can be sloppier, your work can be harder, and you begin to find ways to consume to avoid how that feels. And where was I going with that? So the next piece of that to me was entering into understanding what's love got to do with it. So you say, you know, we talk about love a lot and shifting from fear-based experience to love. And in my mind, this whole transformative process of wellness has to be situated in love if your focus is wellness and transformation. Because to me, the whole background, if you're looking at the picture, the whole background is love. It's all set in love. And it's love that we have to bring into our field, that experience of connection and oneness, or whatever you want to call it, that sets the foundation for whether we move up this pyramid in a positive fashion or whether we move up in a negative fashion, in my mind.
Yes, indeed. That good old energy. Which one are we in, love or fear? Yeah.
It's the never-ending question of how we can. But again, it's the other thing that I love about the pyramid idea is it speaks to something that you and I have talked about for years now, which is energy up and energy down. That it sort of simulates in a way that spiral energy. And again, you can gauge where you are by how the energy feels. Is the energy in an upward motion, or is it in a downward motion? Are you feeling lighter? Are you feeling heavier? I know for me, when I'm engaged in the breath, regardless of my circumstance, if I feel heavy in my world for some reason, if I use breath, I can shift that almost instantly. I can change that almost instantly. If I give myself to the focus of the breath, I can let that energy fly, because it is just energy. It's something coming through that is attaching because of whatever's happening in my field. And I can use breath to help separate that and let it move on so that it doesn't become attached. So in the context of that, setting up how you set up your daily practice, how you exercise your energy through the day, how you create focus, all of that is really going to be driven more powerfully if it's set in a foundation of love. And that love is, we were talking a little bit earlier, kind of reflects up to the top of the pyramid there where the self-care button is. And we'll get into that more, because I think self-care in and of itself is a big topic. But before we dive into really some of the depth of the steps, Jeff, do you have anything you want to say about the love process beyond that?
Just that I'd encourage people to really dissect that word and not think of it as a Valentine's Day concept. Yes, of course, love has a romantic application, but it is an energy in its purest form, and it includes, so many different characteristics, but it's really positive versus negative, love being positive, fear being negative, and it's an energetic state that we're really orienting towards. We're wanting to link positivity, love, and wellness together. And we would be linking fear, negativity, and illness together, just as words to help us communicate the intention that we have of helping people wake up, be more aware, and apply these things that we're sharing to your life, that you could be more positive, flow more in love, and live a more fulfilling, healthy, well life.
Yes, very good. So let's take a start here at the top or the bottom, I guess, from the pyramid. We're looking at the breathing and the mind and the sleeping. So we talked about this pretty extensively, I think, in the last podcast. So we can kind of review here and just lay the foundation again. Whether it's the breathing or the mind, again, my focus here was from the perspective of breath and this tied to some of the stuff we talked about a couple of weeks back too, about the idea of when we come into the planet being presence and breath. That starting with the breath enables you to begin to manage. So you begin to slow the mind down. You begin to become more aware of your body. You become more aware of you in your space. You become more aware of the balance in your body and how you feel, and actually being able to observe all of the experiences of the mind without engaging in the experience of the mind. So in the process of breath, you begin to influence as you focus in breath, and and it doesn't matter, how you do it, and it doesn't take umpteen hours a day to do that. As Jeff had pointed out, somewhere in the vicinity, you're already breathing 20,000 times a day. So if you just change the amount of conscious awareness to your breath in those 20,000 breaths a day, maybe you get conscious of 15 minutes of it. That's a big difference. That's a huge impact when you can spend the time to focus specifically on your pattern of breathing and how the breath moves through your body and how you feel when you're breathing, and exploring the flow of energy that occurs when you're breathing. All of those things, very, very significant and important as they lay the foundation for you being in power within the sphere of your field. That makes sense? Empowerment is the ability to be empowered, and the ability to carry within you the power that is naturally yours and to express it. So if you start to use breath to set that foundation, you're going to be able to, over time, each day, a little more and a little more, exercise the clarity of that power of your creative ability.
Yes, and as we were hoping to get the message across in the last podcast, the idea of breath that we're trying to get across is that you would begin to think of what it is that you are breathing in as an energy supply. And that there are some ancient words for that: chi, prana, just energy in general. But ether, there's so many different concepts, and ancient cultures have tried to help us understand that it's not just molecules of different gases that we're breathing in, oxygen in particular, but it is an energetic fuel, if you will. It's a fuel source that we don't fuel ourselves. So typically most people are only taking half breaths. So when we're talking about breathing, we're talking about taking full breaths in through the nose, pausing as you're digesting all of the energy that you've just consumed, and then exhaling from the mouth to get all of the exchange gases out and the energy that has been consumed. No different than an air filter that then goes through an intake system in a car, and the car combusting and then having an exhaust system. So we're really moving air through ourselves just like any other engine is, and you do that through the fuel system. So if you think of air and breath and everything that's in the air as energy, that's why this is at the bottom of the pyramid. If you want to do well, you have to be full of energy. This is one of the ways that we draw energy to us, is through breath.
Yeah, well said. That's a powerful image and a powerful reality that you become more and more aware of the more you exercise that aspect of your experience. So laying that foundation for breath, very powerful. We move into the mind, and this is where it's interesting to me how much the mind influences in any different direction. It really is about how we set the stage for receiving the mind. There's so many different thoughts about the mind, and the one that I really resonate with is it's more like a receiver. It's information. It's like a giant radio station. there's signal coming through all the time, and the signal's coming from everywhere, and you got to filter out what signal you're paying attention to. And in order to do that, you have to be able to create space in the idea of mind. So again, taking the idea of breath, you're breathing life energy, you're breathing life force, you're breathing prana, you're breathing this energy into your field, and now that energy is clearing, and that energy can open your space. And now, as you pay attention to the mind, the breath also can create space between thought, meaning it's opening the idea. So instead of being this tightly held energy stream that's just kind of ramming through you, and you're like, every time you think, you're like 27,000 thoughts, it begins to kind of expand, and so there's space between thought, and that begins to bring awareness. In my understanding and in my personal experience, it begins to bring awareness to how we are not the mind. It brings awareness to it's doing its thing regardless of what I'm doing. And that's kind of fascinating to me, that there's this thing that's going on inside of my own body that sort of runs its own show, and I can attend to it or not, and I can influence it or not, or it can run the show. And then I am at the effect of whatever stream happens to be tapping into at any given moment, which is going to be impacted by where I am, who I'm with, what the energy of the space that I'm in, the energy of the space, my energetic space. There's so many influences there that affect, and you can watch it happen. You can, in a quiet moment, as you watch the thoughts roll by, you can be aware of an influence of an energy where suddenly you notice, I was in a peaceful place and suddenly the tone of my thoughts are changing. What's that about? And you become aware that there's an influence that's coming through, and the mind is just responding to the influence. You are not necessarily that influence. So what the breath does in relation to the mind is create space, but provide energy for you to manage, to find the observer, to find the space of watching this process instead of continually engaging in the process. What do you think about that?
It's good stuff, Jim. Always has. The summary I would give of why it's important to be aware of what's happening in mind, however we define it, whatever it is, that how much of mind is really us. We do know that some of the studies and research that have been done on thought is that our thoughts, if left on autopilot at least 80% of the time, without there being a pandemic going around in the world, are negative. 80% of the thoughts in normal times, whatever normal is, not like what is happening on the planet right now, 80% of that time is negative. You add a pandemic on top of that, that's got to push that up to the 90th percentile of most thoughts going through our mind are negative, until we say, why do they have to be negative? You can reframe and distill thought down to discovering the flaw in the thought in terms of the lie or a negative piece. When we put truth in place of a distortion of truth, we can convert that negative thought to a positive thought. And then we can watch the magic happen as we realize that we have what we need now. We've always gotten what we've needed. We will always have what we need. That creates a state of being content that will then help us breathe correctly. Or if we're already breathing correctly, then we capitalize on, we've got breath going in the right direction. Now we have mind going in the right direction. And my gosh, then that sets the tone for our day that would lead us to the next step in our pyramid.
Yeah. And I want to add real quickly there that Jeff so beautifully laid out is, number one, understand what he defined for you guys out there is what mass consciousness is. It is just the collection of all the thought that is going on, and it's predominantly negative. And you can watch that, turn on the TV for 20 minutes.
Don't do it.
Literally.
Don't do it.
It doesn't matter what you watch. It's the same message over and over again. And it's actually kind of mind-blowing in a way. But anyway, to move forward. So I want to do a quick shout out to Jackie and Mike and anybody else out there who's listening, our regular visitors. We appreciate you. We love you here at the show, and I'm glad you're here. So moving on. So moving up this pyramid, now we come to the area of sleep. So we've oh, the other piece of this that I want to say about this with the mind is understanding, as Jeff was describing what this new process is. Notice there was no force. Notice there was no pushing. Notice there is no what's the word that I want? It's a process of allowing, but it's also a process of objectifying, meaning the breath allows you space. The space provides context for you to engage at your will, not your will. I want to say engage, but engage by choice. Engage because the word is running around my brain, and it's running all around the outside of the room, and I keep trying to grab it, so I'll come back to it. I don't know where it went. I'm chasing it around in my mind. That's too hysterical. So we move on. We'll come back to that thought. Coming up to sleeping, let's talk about the sleep factor. It's probably the bane of many, many, many people's existence. The thing that is supposed to be the most restorative, the most restful, the most relieving experience is actually one of the more traumatic experiences that we have for many people. Because, and solely, strictly, and only because, unless there is some, you have some actual physical disease process in your system that prevents it, it's all driven by breath and mind. Where you go and sleep is all driven by the work you do in your breath and your mind. So if your breath is always shallow, meaning you only breathe down into about your nipples, you don't breathe into your body, into your lungs, if you don't have any sense of monitoring or managing of the mind, then sleep is going to be problematic, because your sleep time will then be used to resolve or to handle what you haven't been handling in your daytime. And it all goes there. But there in the sleep time, you don't have the filters that you have to avoid it here. Although you could push it to go unconscious, but the reality is the only thing going unconscious is your physical body, not your consciousness. So sleep becomes a really powerful thing, and this becomes also a really awful cesspool if it's not working, because then you try to manage. So this is what the thought that was escaping me, the idea of managing rather than controlling. To Jeff's explanation, what he expressed was an ability and a strength of managing a process as opposed to controlling the process. So you're not controlling the breath, you're not controlling the mind, and if you're trying to, you're in opposition to the thing that you're trying to create peace in. So you're going to behavior modify it. You're not going to change it. And behavior modification works, but for short periods and only until the next thing distracts you and you can't focus anymore. So moving out of behavior modification into management means I'm going to manage my breath, and out of managing my breath, there are results that I can avail myself to. There are things that I can step into that will be inspired by the fact that now I have space in my world, I have energy, I have focus, and I'm using that properly. So that then leads to a quieter mind, a mind that isn't running your life. And then when sleep comes, it is that restorative thing because you've prepared yourself for that restorative thing.
Yes, I was thinking of the number of times I've sat in my office and shared with folks that if there were 5 things that I could help them change in their life to actually live a longer, more fulfilled, healthy life, sleep would definitely be in the top 5. Most people take it for granted that it's just something that we have to do each day. and they just kind of like slide into it and drag themselves into this sacred event that happens every night. For women that have ever gone to a spa, or men that would choose to spend time out on the golf course, I'm just picking those 2 events and dividing them. I know that some women golf and some men go to spas, but I'm just trying to get out here with a generic masculine, feminine activities. If you're going to go to a spa, it generally isn't something that you just drag yourself to at the end of an event. and come with whatever you have. There's generally some preparation regarding looking forward to it, preparing yourself for it. You schedule it, you bring good attitudes and mindsets to the event so that you can maximize what the day spa is intended to be able to help you experience. Same thing on the golf course. You have to bring your equipment. Generally, you have to be familiar with it. You schedule a tee time, you get there in advance, you do a little bit of warm up. There's a lot of prep that goes into just getting out there and swinging the club and hitting the ball. And you have to also stay present to the game the entire time you're playing it. You can't let your mind drift off and go here and there. But my point is, if you really enjoy golf, or you really enjoy going to a spa or the beach or whatever your favorite activity is, you usually have some anticipation in preparing your mind and your body for that event. But unlike golf and unlike going to the spa, which even if you do it, say, once a week, which would be a lot for those activities, you sleep every doggone night. Hopefully every night. This is again, hopefully it should be an every night experience, or if you sleep in the day and work at night, it doesn't have to be night, but this is something that very few people prepare themselves for, to maximize what can be accomplished during sleep. And if you really want to become a master at this whole thing, you give your mind permission to leave the body at night and go into the astral and into the celestial, and really be able to meet up with your spirit guides, or meet up with your higher self, or God, or other ancient energies that want to assist and lead you. As well as, I was just reading a book recently about specific implanted dreams that our spirit guides and our elders put into our mind while we're sleeping. This literally is where we get our downloads and our inspiration. It's where concepts come from. Oh, I have a big decision to make, so let me sleep on it. And through that ego going offline, which happens while we're dreaming, and then the soul, spirit, subconscious, unconscious part of the mind it never goes offline. I mean, the mind does not go off when we're sleeping. There's just parts of it that go offline, so that the real work can be done, and we wake up in the morning with fresh perspective, hopefully new energy to put in place those new fresh perspectives on changes that we want to make in our life. So sleep is so much more sacred and important than the American culture gives to it.
Very good point. And it was flashing through my mind as you were talking that one of the other things that might help our friends out there to understand the importance of this is that if you think about human history, things that have never changed throughout the experience of being human, at least two of them we know for sure, and that is breathing and sleeping. Sleeping and breathing are not things that were created by someone who got creative one day and said, let's find a new way to be a human. This is how you be a human. This is part of the process. So by virtue of it being an organic part of just simply being a human being, it gives credence to the fact that it must be important for some reason. Whether we understand that reason or not is probably not significant, but it could be. But the thing that's significant is honoring what is natural to who we are as an organic species, as a being, as a human. That sleep is a natural part of that process, and a necessary part, because if it wasn't, it wouldn't be there since the origination of the human thing, at least as much as we know. And the same with breathing. There was never a point that the Homo sapien experience was without breath. Maybe in evolution, maybe if we were tadpoles way before that, I don't know how that all works, but as the human body, there was never a point that I've seen in any history book or archaeology or any sociology or science or anything else that says that we did something other than sleep or breathe for the entire existence of the human experience. So let's honor that. Let's support that. Instead of looking for ways around it, let's use it. Let's engage it. It's there all the time for our value and our benefit. So why not take the time to explore? You will find, those of you that are golfers, I was giggling to myself because golfers, among many other types, but golfers in particular, should be easily amenable to things like breathing and meditation, because golf requires such finite focus and requires such an ability to hone your energy in a way that your body and your energy and the way you move the club and the way you hit the ball and the way you create momentum doing that, that's a my English language, that's extraordinary. But it's extraordinary in many different types of things. But the golf example is such a good one. Imagine if you could shift those, not even imagine, imagine shifting the things that you use in that tool, in that exercise alone, applying that to yourself, applying that level of focus to the things that already exist, the breath and the sleeping and the mind that already exist within you. That is a world of extraordinary exploration. If you enjoy the minutia of the golf process and how much it takes to maintain that focus, the experience of engaging in your own self is even more incredible from my experience. And I've golfed and I like golf, and it's I don't know that I could do it every day, but the exploration to me is vastly more profound and more engaging to me. But just a suggestion, just an idea as you think about how you apply these things. So we've talked about breathing and mind and sleeping as a foundation. And I want to shift over here for a second because I want to look at this. Yeah, the other thing that I find with this model that I think is kind of fun is that you look at these foundational elements are all very internal. They're very about self. So here again, another place where the foundation of the success of my experience comes through me, comes through the experience of self, capital S, self. And then as we move into the next section, which we're going to do, we're going to talk about working and consuming and begin to talk about connecting. But this now we've moved from setting a foundation. We've created this internal experience that we're now taking out into the world. Positively or negatively, it happens the same direction. So you build this powerful foundation of consciousness and awareness that now as you move into the world, whatever kind of work you're doing, whatever kind of, whether everything from career to being a parent to being a dog owner. I mean, there's all consideration there about how we look at that. But now we're moving our internal energy out into the external field and the combination of those two. So I just think that's, it's pretty cool, and it's going to get even more interesting because you can see now how what you've generated on the inside is showing up on the outside. That is the process of creation. That is the process of moving things from thought to things, is building that foundation and then having things come into your world. And now I want to apply these tools that I have. I want to get out and I want to do my work, whatever that is. The foundation is there. That work becomes a different experience because it doesn't become that downward energy that, oh God, I got to do this. It becomes, I get to do this. It becomes, I get to do this because it reflects who I am. It reflects the energy that I want to see and show in the world. And it reflects the love that I feel that I want to share because I filled so much with this. And again, love energy. Love/energy. I'm just so full of this upliftment that I gotta pass it on. So I'm going to do that through my work, whatever that is, whether I'm tending to kids or animals or building houses or whatever it is. I'm infusing all of that with this experience that I've created in the foundation of my internal experience. So that's how I want to work my way into this next level of moving out into the world. So we start with working.
As you were talking, Jim, I was, again, since we're developing this model literally in this show, working to me connotes more negativity than positivity. So I think if we had the old model, working would be the right word to use for how we're spending time. Mm-hmm. Most people, again, if you just go back to data and you do a Google search on how many people enjoy their jobs, you're going to find it's only like 15 to 20%. And those people are probably optimistically not being truly honest with themselves My suspicions are that probably fewer than 10% of the people on the planet actually say, I love what I do.
Mm.
And if you love what you do, we always say that's not work. So we would have to change in the wellness model, we would have to change that word, right? And creating would be the word that I would put in place of how we're spending our time that we used to call work, that would be in more of the old model or the negative model. Because it'd be neat to show two models side by side of the old concept or the negative concept versus the positive concept.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about producing, we're talking about creating, but as when Jim and I do these shows, it is not work. It's literally it's a inspirational. We become conduits of a download through a divine flow of information that is life giving. It's life giving. That's why we do this. Yes, there is a selfish reason that Jim and I do this show, because it brings life to us that we want to share with other people. So that to me would not be what I would call work. Work might be the behind the scenes stuff that Jim is so gracious to do, where he's creating all of the connections and putting it on Spotify and iTunes and all these other things. And I don't know if you're doing that laughing and whistling and just having a merry old time. I don't know, because I don't get to see you do that. For me, it would be very challenging for me to do that with a laughing, whistling. Oh boy, I'm getting more downloads, and I can't. That to me would be the work part of it, if there is work.
Yeah.
But
I'll tell you, just to your point, because it's so significant to this conversation, the energy that I apply to that, I'm very conscious of, because that's the energy that's going out to the hundreds of thousands of people we want to reach. So it's extremely important, that energy of my, again, I don't know what it is to me. It's the coffee. The thoughts are escaping as fast as they're coming. I think I said what I needed to say. If I didn't, I'll come back to it.
Mm-hmm. But does creating perhaps work better for us to use the word creating?
Absolutely. I love the differentiation. I love the clarity of it. Yes, absolutely. I think it's a phenomenal shift in choice in thinking about, because like you said, using the idea of working, just saying the word, your energy sort of slopes down.
It does, yeah.
Gotta work. And it doesn't matter. Even if you try to say, I'm doing my work, it still goes work. So,
I think it would also be interesting if we challenged ourselves to look at each of the words in the pyramid to see if they really are positive words that are trying to describe the category that we're laying out here.
Right. And the cool thing is in thinking of it's got me all excited, because it fits so beautifully with your breathing, you're managing the mind, you're being able to sleep, so you're getting all this restorative stuff. And that is truly the foundation of creation. You're nurturing an environment to create, and using working is to assume the creation is done. Using creation is we've moved from thought, we've moved from generation to creation. Now what are we creating? And that can be anything. And it can be about what we do. It could be about what we feel. It can be about how we share. It can be all kinds of cool things. So that's exciting. I'm jazzed about that change. So now we can't make that change this quickly, but we're saying working is migrating, or is actually falling under the category of creating. So we've moved into what I was just saying. So now,
and if we could just pause on this pyramid stage just for one more moment. I was sharing just a second ago my off the top non-data based opinion is that fewer than 10% of the people on the planet are spending time creating, where 90% of the people on the planet are spending time working.
Effort.
The idea would be that we would have future podcasts or live casts where we would help people begin to see the potential for moving from working to creating. that we could get that percentage from 10% to 11 and then 11% to 12. And gosh, wouldn't that be cool if during the course of the rest of your lifetime and my lifetime, we got to see people, make that percentage 50-50. That'd be pretty darn cool.
Yep. People... No, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And again, this idea of the evolution. We're taking this energy internally, we're nurturing it, we're growing it, and now we're bringing it into the world to create. And so you have creation on the positive side, you have maybe work is on the negative side, and that gave me an idea that I'm going to flesh out too. Is like you said, coming up with what is the negative expression, what is the positive expression, and how it shows up, and creating those alternate pyramids so you can see how powerfully they really do line up. So now you're in the creation process. Now you're in the process of you've gone from B, and in B, that lower part of the pyramid, beingness, you're in B. You've created this energy that now is inspiring you to create. The inspiration is coming, the creation is happening. And as that creation is happening, positively or negatively, there is now moving into the idea of consuming. And there may be something in between here. I'm feeling a little, maybe, I don't know if consuming is the right word, we'll see. But so in consuming, I can see that more negatively than I'm able to see it positively, which I find really interesting.
Well, we just had a shift. We just made a mental shift from...
from working to creating. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So we'll have to fuss around in this consuming thing, because the consuming thing to me is the negative comes to a negative expression.
Yes, it does.
That, you're not happy, you're not breathing, you're not necessarily clearing your thought, you're not sleeping very well, you're carrying that into your work is not fulfilling, it's not energy lifting. So in the consuming phase, this is where it sort of opens up into full-blown manifestation. So maybe there's our word, creation into manifestation, or working into consuming. And we'll have to play with that a little. But the idea that we consume, now the consumption is based on a negative premise. So I'm unhappy, things aren't working the way I want them to. So maybe if I eat this, drink this, consume this, fuck this, whatever consuming I'm going to do is going to make me feel better. That's the reason you're doing it, is to make you feel better. But conversely, when you're going from creating to, what was the word? To manifesting, you're doing the exact same thing. It's just from a completely different foundation, completely different viewpoint.
Yeah, I believe when you came up with the word consuming, you were trying to use a word that would include both the eating and drinking, and what we're using to fuel the physical body. So fueling or energizing could be a word used here that doesn't really have a positive or a negative. It's just a category. But isn't it interesting, though, that really ultimately what we're trying to do is lay out a way to manifest, and maybe that's something up at the top of the pyramid. The word manifesting might be up near the top of the pyramid, that if you're doing all of these steps, you will create an experience where you become a manifester. Possibly. We'll see where that best fits, but that's definitely a word that needs to be in the pyramid, is manifesting.
Yeah. So any go ahead, sorry.
So the word con, you have pros and cons, right? So if you put con in front of a word, it's usually more negative. So that would be the word on the negative side of the pyramid. The pro side of taking in sustenance, because we do believe we're physical bodies. We do believe that they need to be fueled. And as long as we do, there are more healthy things to put in the body than your choice of how am I going to hydrate myself. There's many ways to do that. many choices. Some are very good for you, some are not very good for you. But some people believe you can energize your body by the first hour and the last hour of each day by simply exposing yourself to sunlight. There are some sacred books that say Adam and Eve existed on the planet without eating food, and it was through the temptation of the serpent that said you need to eat, and it was the bite of the apple that put them into a physical, more of a physical state. It was the idea that you need to consume food to sustain yourself. Now, I'm not saying I'm taking a position on that. All I'm saying is we really don't know. If you're really truly honest with ourselves, we do not know what the true potential of the human condition is with regard to how do we really need to sleep. Some people say you don't. Do we really need to eat? Some people say you don't. And these would be people in India that can levitate, that can walk on water, that can shapeshift. I mean, we really don't know what the true ultimate potential of the human experience is.
Yeah.
But the people that we're listening to, or people that are listening to us, probably aren't levitating. They probably aren't shape-shifting. So we're talking to people who may want to learn how to do those things someday, but we're not there yet. So we're going to still be talking about how to take care of this body in its physical form in the most healthy way.
Very cool. So we're for the listeners out there, if anybody has a suggestion, you're welcome to throw it at us as far as how we would express consuming in a more positive way, so that we have that positive expression and the negative expression. And I'm still running around in there. Have you landed anywhere, Jeff, on something that